The God's back.
Let go.
Let's get locked in.
My fellow Atlanteans, today we stand at the precipice of history, poised to confront the darkest chapters of our past and forge a future defined by justice, equity, and universal reparations. As the sovereign ruler of the United States of Atlantis, it is my solemn duty to address the egregious crimes perpetrated against our people. Crimes that have been systematically buried beneath the sands of time. We gather here not merely to recount the injustices of yesteryears, but to demand restitution for the sins of our predecessors. The U.S. Patent Department, a bastion of innovation corrupted by greed and thievery, has pillaged the genius of our minds, appropriating our inventions and ideas with callous disregard for our sovereignty. Stolen identities of our indigenous brethren, erased from the annals of history, cry out for recognition and redemption. Land grants once promised as a beacon of hope have been perverted into tools of oppression, denying our black-melanated brothers and sisters the very soil upon which they tread. We will not turn a blind eye to the scorched earth of our ancestral homes, razed to the ground by the flames of racism and government complicity. We demand reparations, not as a gesture of charity, but as a debt owed to us by those who sought to eradicate our presence from the annals of time. To those who will seek to obstruct our path to justice, heed my words. The United States of Atlantis will not falter, nor will we waver in our pursuit of righteousness. We will dismantle the old systems of oppression, brick by brick, until every vestige of racism, discrimination, lies in ruins at our feet. No longer will business grants be bestowed upon immigrants, while our own people languish in the shadows of neglect. From this day forth, every Atlantean, regardless of race or creed, shall have equal access to the resources and opportunities that are rightfully theirs. Let this be a clarion call to all who will stand in opposition to the tide of change. The United States of Atlantis will not rest until every injustice has been rectified, until every debt has been repaid, and until every soul walks free from the shackles of oppression. Together we shall build a future where justice reigns supreme, where the sins of the past serve as the foundation for a brighter tomorrow. May this be a dawn of a new era for Atlantis, where the echoes of our collective struggle resound throughout the ages. Thank you, and may justice guide our path forward.
the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.
The time has come. Execute Order 66.
Well, well, well.
You're live with
You know,
King
there's a lot of
MattTheGod.
Arabic people and
God's
Palestinian
back.
people.
Let go.
A lot of people over there with blue eyes.
Obviously, the issue of Asian American owned businesses operating in black communities is a huge source of tension because it is part of the daily violence faced by black people in their own communities when they are disrespected as customers, to the literal physical violence, as was the case of the salon in Brooklyn, where a black woman was locked into the salon by workers while they beat her with broomsticks, to the damage done to the psyches of particularly black children when they are accused of shoplifting. And this isn't a topic that I'm going to be able to cover in one video, but it is a conversation that I do want to start. I think that if you ask some people what was the source of the tension, they'll say the LA riots and what happened in Koreatown, but you cannot mention the LA riots without recognizing the unaliving of Latasha Harlins the year before. A 15-year-old girl who was unalived by an Asian shop owner who thought that she was shoplifting orange juice, but the money to pay for the orange juice was in her hand when she was unalived. To overlook that is to value profit and property over black bodies, which is at the root of the United States systemically racist system and capitalism. But I think that we have to go all the way back to the Civil Rights Amendment of 1964 and then the opening of Asian immigration in 1965. So in 1964, white power structure almost faced accountability to black people. Black people should have started to be able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. But instead, in 1965, the United States opened the door to Asian immigration, and redlining meant that Asian Americans were receiving business loans, but only to open businesses in black communities, and black people were still not receiving loans to open businesses in their own communities. So where you have this weaponized positionality of Asian Americans being put in black people's way, of course you are going to have resentment not only over the supplanted opportunity to open businesses in their communities, but also over the fact that the black dollar is now being paid out twice. Once when the customer pays for the goods or services, and then again when the Asian business owner removes that wealth from the black community. And I frequently heard the tension being framed as mutual misunderstanding, where these Asian shop owners didn't know about the civil rights struggles of black people, and black people were not familiar with the culture of Asian business owners. But I don't think that it can be framed as mutual misunderstanding where there is an uneven power dynamic. You have one demographic that is the business owners, and you have the other demographic that is having to pay. So where there is uneven power, I don't think that it's accurate to frame it as mutual misunderstanding. Yes, this is really important. Asian Americans were redlined from opening businesses in white neighborhoods because white people didn't want Asian Americans operating in their neighborhoods and didn't want Asian Americans profiting off of white people. But because the positionality of Asian Americans is weaponized to oppress black people, Asian Americans were being given loans to open businesses in black communities, even though black people were not able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. Thank you for setting me up to talk about this. I know that you and many other black people know the answer, but it is something that I'm still processing, and it hits me really hard in the gut. And so I want people to understand that I am answering the question, what do I know? I'm not speaking for anyone. Many commenters today have pointed out how many affluent black towns have been created and destroyed throughout United States history. And most non-black people know about the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street, Lake Lanier. But it was many black towns. One commenter said over 60. And it's not that some Black people sometimes were able to establish a successful community that accumulated wealth. It's that Black people were consistently able to go anywhere and together establish strong communities that accumulated wealth and had education systems and businesses and were thriving. And every time it happened, people destroyed them. And then as you progress through time, it becomes less acceptable to burn and flood and massacre entire towns. So again, you have the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and the United States opens the door to Asian immigration in 1965. The United States has a long history of using immigrants to get in the way of Black people. And so I think that this system of using immigrant-owned businesses in Black communities is designed to siphon wealth away from Black communities. And another commenter asked me, why do I think that people are afraid of letting Black people build their communities and accumulate wealth and to thrive? And we see it so many times. It's because they fear revenge, because they know what they have done to Black people. But again, we have been told that if Black people wanted revenge, it would have happened already. That is not what they want. And I think that people think that the violence and exploitation and abuse of power that they have exacted upon Black people and all Black, brown, indigenous, and people of color is a universal human trait, and that if anybody has that wealth and power, then they would return that evil in kind. But it's not. It is specific to, and all Black people want is to be allowed to thrive and accumulate wealth and exist as other people have been allowed to do.
Patients are more than their disease. That's why for over 100 years, Novo Nordisk.
So my ancestors were asked by white men to come to this country, which they had stolen and forced Black people to build, because they were hoping that my ancestors would be the new cheap and disposable labor to undercut the recently freed Black people that lazy white men didn't want to pay. And when my ancestors wouldn't do that, they were lynched and massacred, their towns were destroyed, they were blown up while building the railroads, and ultimately they were excluded from society and the country for nearly 60 years. Then when the United States asked us to come back in the 1960s because they wanted to put us in the way of Black people again, and the United States needed to rehabilitate its reputation with Asian countries that were gaining in economic and political power, we had civil rights because of Black people. You're obviously not aware of this, but blessed is not a word that the global majority thinks of in association with Europeans. Words like plague and colonizer, maybe, but not blessed. And the cell phone in my hand came from China. So I don't know if you're referencing Steve Jobs or Martin Cooper or the Finnish inventor who created the first pocket-sized telecommunication device in 1917, and you probably don't know either because your education system has left you terribly ignorant and without the critical thinking skills necessary to effectively gather information. Because you believe that most great inventions can be attributed to one white person, as opposed to recognizing that the patent system is how white people colonize intellectual property. We would not have cell phones if it wasn't for the creation of the gamma electrical cell by Black inventor Henry T. Sampson. And most of our cell phones would not have microphones in them if it wasn't for the particular microphone that was created by Black inventor James Edward West. The creation of the first digital network, 1G, was launched in Japan, and then Black electrical engineer Jesse Russell pioneered the creation of 2G, which launched in Finland first. 3G launched in Japan, 4G launched in Norway, 5G launched in South Korea, and 30% of the world's cell phones are manufactured in China. Because we, of the global majority, recognize that collective humanity has the ingenuity and creativity of one another to thank, whereas a lot of European Americans are laboring under the delusion that the rest of us have white people to thank. And it's this narcissistic ignorance that causes people like you to do embarrassing things, like leaving comments about Europeans and cell phones on a video about systemic anti-Black racism in the United States. And while that could be written off as a comedic and senile non sequitur, we recognize it as a desperate attempt to center yourself in a conversation that has nothing to do with you. The irony being that white people like to say not all white people and they shouldn't be held accountable for the misdeeds of their ancestors, yet they want to be associated with the greatness of the things that they think they invented. Oh boy. So, John Michael Kohler was an American who invented the bathtub in 1883. But let's think about this critically. Do you really think that nobody took a bath until John Michael Kohler invented the bathtub in 1883? Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So what he was talking about is the fact that Africans introduced bathing and the concept of personal hygiene to Western Europe in order to build a healthier society during the 800-year occupation of Spain. In particular, a man by this name introduced the practices of bathing, shaving, and using toothpaste, as well as drastically improving the eating habits of Western Europeans. Additionally, the first recorded history of people taking baths was in India in 500 BC. A lot of us have gotten used to how little history some people like you know, particularly where it comes to anything not Eurocentric. However, I have a tip. Before you make a comment like this, do a quick Google search for whatever you think the topic at hand is. In this case, who invented bathing or who introduced bathing to Europe, and then decide whether you still want to make this comment. Hey buddy, your comment needs some help because when Dr. Earl Haas patented the tampon in 1931, he got the idea from his friend. She used a sponge because before this, women around the globe had been using tampons for thousands of years. There was a medical document that described the use of papyrus tampons that came from Egypt around the 15th century BCE. And I think what you meant to say was this modernized world was made possible by labor and ideas stolen by white greedy bad men exploited for ruthless capitalism. Because you are yet another narcissist who's been indoctrinated by the education system to lack the critical thinking skills to understand that patenting does not equal invention. Patenting is the colonization of intellectual property, because invention usually requires the collective efforts of a diverse group of people over time. As I tell my students when they're having difficulty learning something, try to be patient and don't be too hard on yourself. The ability to apply logical reasoning to historical fact isn't going to make sense to somebody who watches a video correcting an erroneous comment about the 1800s who responds with stay in the 21st century. But it's okay, we all have our strong suits. Being an ignorant bigot isn't mine, and intelligence isn't yours, but I'm sure there are things that you're good at that you can focus on and celebrate. And if you'd like to get better at being intelligent, again, be patient, practice every opportunity that you have, and I'm sure that you can improve. I hope that helps. Important facets of my personality include kindness and empathy and the courage to speak up against wrongdoing, which is why I spend a lot of time advocating for dismantling white culture and explaining the history of current forms of systemic oppression. And my original intent was to encourage Asian Americans to engage in anti-racist work and to unlearn anti-black bias. But who knew? There are so many narcissistic white people who show up to center themselves in conversations that don't have to have anything to do with them unless they identify with race, white supremacy culture, and upholding forms of systemic oppression.
You guys, this lady is savage, and the fact that she does it with a straight face. She has all the historical facts. She definitely does her homework. In Nigeria, we'll say she's giving it to them hot. She's giving it
retained by like the daisy chain of like comment not available that like goes back like a dozen times. It's just like a graveyard of vanquished foes.
Thing that a white person can do in this country that a black person cannot is be viewed as an individual.
Because you fucking ate.
But blessed is not a word that the global majority thinks of in association with Europeans.
It's a particular pleasure that I indulge in when folks who look like me and couple their appearance with ignorance and arrogance get chewed up, eaten alive, spit out, no crumbs left by people who don't look like me. And that lady, with education, articulation, and all the receipts, it's the truth of the matter that makes it so pleasurable for me.
And to unlearn anti-black bias. But who knew? There are so many
She said who knew? She's a freaking comedian. Racism is so instilled in white fragility culture, when you attack it, they will think you're attacking all of them.
I don't record a response until I'm able to be calm about it.
Huh. Wait to respond until emotionally stable.
You're obviously not aware of this, but blessed is not a word the global majority think.
Baby, when I tell you she out here giving life lessons, and she deserved to go viral for this video. See, I've already liked this video as much as one person possibly can, so I had to stitch it again. So, all my people who following me will go over on her page and like it some more. That's just how much I liked it. I'm about to start a collection plate for her, because, baby, she should be paid for the teachings that she just taught.
So see, you guys, she said so much in her videos that black people didn't even need to make extra responses to provide extra information or whatever.
Why do white people hate black people so much? I have been in situations where I've been surrounded by nothing but white people, and this conversation has come up. The race conversation has come up. And no one ever has an actual reason as to why they hate black people. There's always these, oh, black on black crime. Oh, they're lazy. Oh, they're this. But it's not actually, there's no legitimacy behind their reasoning. It's just that they've heard and they're regurgitating. And so, long story short, it really comes down to there is no reason. It's a deep-seated jealousy, a deep-seated hate that, you know, black people exude greatness. Black people are the great inventors. Black people are the beginning of the human race, the Eve gene. And white people have worked so hard to erase the history and erase the greatness of the black race. Down to even when things are invented, the majority of things that are invented were invented by a black person. But yet the white race has actually erased the original inventor from history and have put their names on things that they had no business putting their names on.
Oof. It's weird to be a race that acts inhumane but pushes the narrative on another race. This is one of the many insidious ways white supremacy culture shows up in those of us that are white-bodied individuals. And I say insidious because it's only subtle to us, but very plain to see for black and brown indigenous people of color. When we're convinced that we are and consider ourselves to be safe and benevolent white folks who don't see color, we are so dangerous. Because underneath all that and color blindness lies some very foundational beliefs about what it means to be a good person in this world. And what do you know? All those characteristics just so happen to look like what it means to be white. We have to recognize that we have been raised in and therefore conditioned to think in terms of a racial caste system. So as long as black and brown indigenous people of color are able to assimilate into whiteness, they're okay, and even heralded as exceptional people. But as soon as someone starts to question things or show that they're not grateful to be an American, we're like, what's the deal? I mean, I know things were bad, but can't we just move on? If you could just get with the program, you'd be accepted just fine. Sure enough, when people don't just get with the program and assimilate into white supremacy culture, they're labeled in all sorts of awful ways that are really just a projection of ourselves. And worst of all, their lives are constantly in danger. So until we do the work of dismantling white supremacy culture within us, no amount of being will do.
Well, it's about time they start saying it. At least they're admitting it now. They are not saying anything that we didn't know, but maybe now that they are saying it and admitting to this, those of them in the back that have waxes for it up and funds it and keeps it alive and thriving. Hell, you guys invented racism. But the people who are trying to dismantle all of this system, all of this insanity, they are the rate to desist? Or is it when they say, oh, black people are lazy? You guys did not even build your countries on your own. You guys had to, enslave people to build your countries. You guys sat back and were sipping tea while other people were doing the work, but you want to come out and talk about how these people are the lazy ones. Like, huh? All these black people are committing crimes. They are criminals. It cannot be you, a descendant of colonizers, saying that. No, it can't.
And reddish brown hair. I don't know where they got it from over there in the Middle East. I'm sure it was some kind of gene.
Christians in his country. I don't trust him. And currently, I don't speak Russian.
Well. There's a lot of Arabic people and Palestinian people. A lot of people over there with blue eyes and reddish brown hair. I don't know where they got it from over there in the Middle East. I'm sure it was some kind of gene. Just like being black and just like being white, it has to do with your genes, the color of your eyes. I'm sure we could find out. But Putin and dusting off his black Jesus from the Kremlin attic, that is one heck of a... Why are we just finding out? Did I think Jesus was blonde and blue-eyed? I didn't really care. I do care about my wig, though. My hair's looking... it's time for a do. But anyway, get back. Mr. Putin, you drew the race card. Now what you going to do with it? You got all these black people excited that you have a picture of a black Jesus. You're saying black. To me, sir, it just looks like a dark Jesus. Because I don't know what kind of paint or colors or whatever they had over there. But they had to have something for black. Was it coal? What was it? Anyway, Mr. Putin, you're sneaky. You're gonna nuke us, aren't you? You're just doing something to hurt the whole world before you nuke us all. I don't know. Doesn't matter what color Jesus is. Is this gonna change what he does for us after we've been worshiping him? I don't worship a picture, never have. I'm not Catholic. Mr. Putin, what do you think you're doing to Joe? Hurting his feelings? No, I did not vote for Joe. Anyway, black people, I'm happy for you. Something ought to make you happy. I mean, come on now. Because y'all been really upset for years, huh? I hope this helps you. Just like when I voted for Obama, because I was hoping he would be a great president for the blacks. So they can stop being so racist against white people. Because they think the white people invented slavery when actually I want to go there. But Mr. Putin, you drew out that race card, and I want to know why.